We are now going to have a short film on Professor Dr. Makarand Hastak. Technical team.
Dr. Makarand Hastak is a professor and head of the Division of Construction Engineering and Management, as also a professor of civil engineering at Purdue University. He has been involved with the construction industry for the past 3 decades. He has conducted research, taught and assisted the industry in the areas of construction engineering and management, including process improvement, disaster risk reduction, infrastructure management, and project management decision making. Dr. Hastak is a professional engineer and a certified cost professional. He obtained a BE degree from Nagpur University before heading to the University of Cincinnati to pursue his MS in civil engineering. He went on to complete his PhD in civil engineering from Purdue University in 1994. He has authored over 200 publications that relate to process improvement, project controls, capital rehabilitation planning, strategic planning and decision making based on his work. He also serves on the Education Board of the Association for Advancement of Cost Engineering. We are honored to welcome Dr. Makarand Hastak.
Professor Dr. Makarand Hastak, Head Construction Engineering, Management and Civil Engineering, Purdue University, USA.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. Dignitaries on the dais, and off the dais, and my fellow educators. First of all, good afternoon. And thank you for inviting me here today to share my thoughts on globalization of Indian higher education. I hope my thoughts will inspire you and perhaps help in drawing this roadmap. As was introduced, I am a product of the Indian higher education system. But after working for a few years in the Indian construction industry, I realized that I needed to learn more. And as many of my other colleagues and many of my friends, I decided to go overseas to continue my higher education. After finishing my PhD in civil engineering at Purdue University, I moved around the country and worked at many top universities in the US before coming back to the US before coming back to Purdue about 17 years ago. And for the last 10 years, I've had the honor of leading one of the best construction engineering and management programs in the country and perhaps around the world. So my 30 years in the industry and academia has given me a global perspective, some of which I would like to share with you today. So in my humble opinion, I think 2 things are important for globalization of Indian higher education. The first being that we should learn from the world and adopt some of the best practices that we find are suitable for the Indian higher education system. And the second, which I think is equally important, is that we should find ways to attract the world to learn from the Indian higher education system as well. As was pointed out by many speakers this morning, that India has much to offer, but we need to explore what that is and perhaps showcase that so that we are able to attract students from all over the world that would want to come to India and continue their higher education. So in terms of to learn from the world, my first point, I think we need to be willing to change and to adopt best practices that add value to our existing system. This would require, of course, a very critical self-assessment and perhaps structural as well as pedagogical changes to bring the Indian higher education system at par with the best of the world. Some of the structural changes that I believe would add value include, one, that we should require a tenure system for all our faculty that is based on research, teaching, and service. Now you see, academics of Indian origin work very hard in the US institutions and have excelled in all fields as educators, researchers, and administrators. Now they have worked hard in part because they want to succeed in their environment and satisfy the tenure requirements. The tenure, as you might know, is based on their contribution to research, teaching, as well as service to the industry. Now, yes, these individuals are talented. However, I think the motherlode of this talent is right here in India, sitting right in front of me. Imagine that if a similar environment is created in India, where our young academics are encouraged to use their creative talents and intellect to create new boundaries in knowledge, the value proposition of the Indian higher education system will excel in no time. However, this cannot be done if the right infrastructure is not available. We should have funding agencies to support research. That includes public as well as private sources. Research requires funding sources from not only the government, but also from public and private agencies, where we can explore public-private partnership and how we can move the Indian industry further from a research point of view. Now, I know that some of that structure exists, but I wonder, with no incentive, how much of those resources are actually being utilized to generate new knowledge? I believe that we should engage the industry in the learning process through internships and active participation. Engaging the potential employers in the education systems add tremendous value for the students and the industry. Now, in my program at Purdue, experiential learning is the basis of the program. We require our students to undertake 3 paid 12-week internships where we place them with about different companies around the country for their internship every summer. Now, you can imagine that by the time they graduate, they already have 5, 6, 7 offers because the companies have seen them, have understand what they have to offer, and the richness that they bring back to the classroom is very challenging. As professors, we are challenged because now the student has been exposed to the industry and they have much more better questions to ask and much more depth to explore as they try to understand the subject matter that is to be presented. So in my opinion, experiential learning is the key to engaging these young minds to explore further. We should encourage faculty to obtain PhDs. We should collaborate with institutions all over the world to make that a possibility. I can assure you that at Purdue, if we were to explore schemes such as that, we would be very happy to engage institutions where faculty would want to come and finish their PhDs or continue their further education. I think to improve the system to global standards, it is important that we encourage young academics to pursue these terminal degrees in their respective professions. We should establish collaborations with international institutions to help these individuals attain their objectives. Another point I would like to stress is that we should consider offering salary and benefits that would encourage more individuals to consider academia as a profession. I was very happy to hear Rahul Kararji mention earlier this morning that that is one of the emphasis that he has also placed at this institution. Now, you all would agree with me that to train as an academic requires long years of research and learning. So it is important to increase the value proposition of the academic profession and offer it commensurate salary and the rightful honor that it deserves. Now, in addition to structural changes, I believe that we also need to look at pedagogical changes that we should evaluate and consider. We should consider how subject matter is imparted in our colleges. Do we still believe in rote memorization? Or are we talking about meaningful learning and active learning? As you might know, rote learning is basically your memory, whereas meaningful learning or active learning is when you have engaged with the content, perhaps applied it to different scenarios, case studies, and so on. You're engaging the young minds to explore what is the meaning of the subject matter that we are trying to impart, rather than simply regurgitating what they have memorized in a rote memorization format. We should also encourage our students to be global citizens. I think somebody earlier also mentioned that we should encourage our students to be global citizens. We should put together a system whereby students have a way of exploring studies overseas, perhaps just a summer, perhaps just one of the semesters that they can spend overseas. I can assure you that that would open their eyes to much broader avenues that when they bring back to this country would do a lot of benefit for everybody. We should encourage global faculty engagement through invitation and webinars. Now, the schemes like Gyan and Vajra, I think these are very useful tools started by the government to encourage some of the academics from overseas to come and spend some time here in the country and offer courses, perhaps 1 week or 2 weeks of duration. So I think that's a good start. We should encourage global collaboration and research and teaching. So if we are encouraging all our young academics to pursue their PhDs overseas, that will form that relationship with whatever institution they work with, and that is only going to grow as they come back and contribute to the academic institutions here, and that relationship continues to grow. So we should encourage some of that as well. As I mentioned before, experiential learning is, to me, a key in educating these young minds. Internships, public-private partnership in education are the way to go in encouraging some of these minds. Now let me put a proposition. What if all of your colleges, each batch in your college, were to adopt a village? If you engage your students in exploring what could be improved in that village, you can imagine that with time passing by and these young minds with their aspirations and their desire to do something important for the country, we can fix many of the problems that we see in those villages which often get neglected. But that's the education process. It's the experiential learning process where the students learn, the educators are able to engage their ideas and thoughts to these students, they're able to do something good, and everybody is a winner in that process. We should explore what new areas of study can be offered that support the national need. For instance, I look around and I see that there's major emphasis on infrastructure building here in the country. But when I look around, I don't see there are many, many programs in construction, engineering, and management. I can count them on my fingers. So that is an area of study that I believe if we are able to train individuals to be experts in construction, engineering, and management, there would be a lot of infrastructure issues that we have in this country might get properly facilitated. That's just one of the areas that comes to mind. Now, in addition to learning from the world, I mentioned that we should attract the world to learn from the higher education system in India. And I think to do that, we need to identify the value that we want to propose to a prospective student. Now, why should an international student come to India rather than anywhere else in the world for their higher education? What is the value proposition? Is it research that is value adding? But as we discussed earlier, that requires research active faculty, that requires active funding sources for supporting these research. Many of you know that students, when they go overseas, they're looking for funding. And same would happen if students were to come to India for their higher education. They would be looking for funding and research opportunities to grow their perspective. Now, that also requires a need and desire for the faculty to pursue research. Or is it the learning environment? What value proposition does it offer? What cultural exposure can we offer to these students? And as was pointed out by Dalai Lamaji this morning, that India has much to offer in terms of cultural richness, the historical value in the education system, that could perhaps be that value-adding proposition that would attract students from overseas to come and pursue their higher education here in India. What level of diversity do we have in our colleges? Can we improve that so that when an international student comes to this country, they feel that they are welcome, that they are here to gain and learn from the system that they are investing in? Talking about value proposition, is it the pedagogical approach to higher education that sets us apart? Perhaps value derived from traditional Indian education system. or perhaps the pedagogical innovations that were discussed early in the morning by many of the speakers, perhaps that is the value-adding proposition. What new areas of study can be offered? And what would be attractive for an international student? Can we offer perhaps interdisciplinary studies? Then is it even feasible within the existing university systems? Are there non-conventional areas of study that students can come to India and perhaps find it more exciting rather than exploring other avenues in other countries? What are subjects that are unique to India that would attract these students? Perhaps the peace curriculum that was being discussed earlier is one of those avenues. Now, I believe that if we desire to create a roadmap for globalization of higher education in India, we must consider the 2 points that I just raised. One, being that we need to learn from the world and adopt some of the best practices. And second, to attract the world to learn from the Indian higher education system, that is the value proposition. So with that, I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Makarand Hastak, our guest of honor. Thank you for your valuable thoughts. We now